Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the Petty Politic. Please hit the like and the subscribe button. You guys see the thumbnail there? Fauci is Trump's fault. Fauci is all Trump's fault. Think about the scapegoat. He is the scapegoat. Fauci. Think about how wild that whole statement is. Trump's own administration put the mitigation framework in place. Trump's own coronavirus task force recommended the guidance. Trump's own signature was in the emergency declarations. Trump's own administration stood behind the daily briefings. Y'all remember those daily briefings? And then, Trump allowed his supporters to beat the living daylights out of the very man who was publicly explaining those policies that Donald Trump put in place. Trump's own signature was on those emergency declarations. Coronavirus Task Force recommended his guidance. He let Anthony Fauci take the heat. He let Anthony Fauci take the heat last week for carrying out a strategy that came out of his own goddamn administration. It was a masterclass in responsibility dodging. This administration is the most unaccountable ever in the history of administrations. Unaccountable for anything. And then there's the Operation Warp Speed. Let's talk about that for a minute. Because the hypocrisy is almost poetic. Donald Trump still brags about Operation Warp Speed as one of the greatest accomplishments of his presidency. And I'll be honest, on speed alone, it was remarkable. I'll give Donald Trump that. The federal government poured billions of dollars into accelerating vaccine development. It cut through that bureaucracy. I got that. It used the Defense Production Act. I got that. It partnered with private industry. We also got that. And vaccines reached the public faster than almost anybody expected. That happened under Trump's administration. His people ran it. His administration funded it. His administration celebrated it. His name was attached to it. But then something happened, right? Part of his own political base turned against the vaccine. Because Donald Trump told him to turn against the vaccine. People who had once cheered Warp Speed started calling the vaccines poison. Doctors became the enemy. Fauci became the enemy. Scientists became the enemy. Public health officials became the enemy. And Trump suddenly found himself trapped because he's a scammer and he only thinks of himself first. So he had to figure out a way to get out of it. Let him dump on Fauci. He found himself trapped. If he defended the vaccines, his own supporters would get angry because y'all goofy like that and you don't believe in science. If he abandoned the vaccines, he'd be abandoning one of the achievements he still brags about today. So what happened? The anger got redirected. They found a villain. Donald Trump allowed his Republican base to vilify Anthony Fauci. Again and again. It wasn't by accident. That was politics. Donald Trump did all of this. If Donald Trump truly believed Anthony Fauci was leading America down a disastrous path, he had options. He wasn't a governor. Fauci wasn't a governor. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't a television commentator. He wasn't a pundit. Donald Trump was the president of the United States. He could have removed Fauci from the task force. He could have appointed somebody else. He could have publicly rejected the recommendations. He could have told the country, we're going in another direction. He had the constitutional authority. He had the executive power. He had the biggest microphone in the world. He chose not to use it. Now, before I go any further, watch what happened as this hearing continued. Video E. Goofy. Hold on.
You're not recognized. You're not recognized. If you are unruly, you will be removed from the proceeding. You are not. You are not recognized, and you are not recognized, sir. Sir, you are not recognized. You are not recognized. Security. We'll hold off. But you will respect these proceedings. You were told not to sit at the table. You insist on sitting at the table. And we told you you would not be recognized. You are not invited here for testimony, sir. You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another.
Y'all see how that hearing started out? Y'all see that? Y'all see how Trump let the Republican senators talk to Fauci, and this never was it was never Fauci's fault. Okay? Fauci made mistakes. Of course he made mistakes. Of course he did. What happened? What happened? Let's go back to the beginning. If we're going to have an honest conversation about the national dumpster fire that was the early COVID response, we need to stop letting people play this convenient game of revisionist history like the Republicans are doing or did last week. Because what I watched for the last 4 or 5 years is one of the most successful political shell games ever seen. The Republican right has taken a complicated, messy, terrifying public health crisis and turned it into a simple cartoon. Anthony Fauci, the all-powerful villain who locked America down, destroyed the economy, and laughed while he did it. They talked about the man like he was the supreme emperor of the United States. Like he had a master switch on his desk that crossed every diner, shut down every school, canceled every little league, and ordered police to drag people off the beaches. They act like, the Republicans act like, the right acts like, the MAGA people act like, Fauci woke up one morning, decided he hated freedom, and single-handedly rewrote the Constitution. It was absolute theater last week. It was a shell game. And it is long past time we put the blame where it actually belongs. Anthony Fauci was an advisor. He was a career civil servant. That's all he was a grunt work. That's all he did. He had no authority to do anything. He just followed the science. He was an unelected medical official sitting at a microphone giving recommendations. That's it. He did not have the constitutional authority to shut down a single state. He did not have the power to issue emergency declarations. He did not control the Treasury. He did not sign a single stimulus check. He did not command the National Guard. He did not have the final say on anything that actually mattered at the federal level, okay? Do you know who did, though? Donald J. Trump. Let's get the order of operations straight, because apparently the Republican Party, the MAGA Party, the Republican right don't seem to understand that. They seem to have spent years deliberately scrambling it or deliberately not understanding it or telling their people lies about who's in control. In March 2020, when the country was in free fall, and hospitals in New York and New Jersey were turning into war zones, it was not Anthony Fauci who stood at the podium and told the American people, we need 15 days to slow the speed. It was Donald Trump. His administration put it out there. His name was attached to the entire campaign. When those 15 days turned into 30 days, 40 days, it was not Fauci who signed off on that extension. It was Trump. When the federal government started pouring trillion of dollars into stimulus packages that effectively paid states and businesses to stay locked down, it was Trump. It was the Trump administration that wrote those checks. And some from Biden, but mostly Trump. When the governors across the country used federal emergency declarations and CDC guidance as cover for their own restrictions, they were operating inside a framework that the Trump White House had blessed and amplified. Fauci was a face on television. That's it. He had no power. Trump was the man with the pen. Trump was the man with the power. Trump allowed the public his Republican right, his goofy MAGA base, the right, the conservatives, he allowed them goofy folks to villainize Fauci. Let me play this video. Go. Uno momento, y'all. Hold on.
Transcribe sworn interviews answering questions about the very issues that are now the subject of this hearing. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion. Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
Let's stop right there. That is the headline. That's the headline right there. Anthony Fauci just invoked the Fifth Amendment. And depending on which cable news channel you watch, there's either proof that he's guilty or proof that he's the victim of a political witch hunt. I'm not here tonight to argue either one of those cases. I'm here to ask a much simpler question. How did Fauci become the face of America's COVID response in the first place? Donald Trump stood at that damn podium every day. Donald Trump was at the forefront of this every day, on camera, and the platform, saying goofy shit all day, every day. That was Donald Trump. Because that story doesn't begin with Anthony Fauci. It begins with the President of the United States. And that's the part so many of the right, goofy MAGA side, those conservatives, that's the part that they conveniently always want to forget. That Donald Trump was the person who was commanding Fauci. What the hell makes you think? Because every day, all day, you have conservatives, MAGA, all y'all goofiness over here talking about don't nobody run Donald Trump. Donald Trump is his own man. Donald Trump do what he want to do. So if Donald Trump is his own man, Donald Trump do what he want to do, Donald Trump say what he want to say, why the hell would y'all think that Fauci would be speaking for himself? Why would you blame Fauci when it was Donald Trump who gave Fauci the orders? Donald Trump created Fauci, and Donald Trump let Fauci take the fall for y'all goofy madness on y'all side. Let me play this other clip.
Material false statement to Congress with a penalty up to 5 years of imprisonment. Understanding that you are under oath, the American people would like to understand your reasoning, your rationale for why you chose to fund the research in Wuhan. There have been, intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the DOE, have all come to the conclusion that more likely than not the virus came from the lab in Wuhan. And so we'd like to know what was the rationale, what was the discussion, how, what went behind the decision to fund the research in Wuhan. How did you come to the conclusion that a totalitarian country would be capable of doing this in a VSL-2 lab, a lab that lacked the security What was the reasoning, and are you sorry, basically, for making the decision? Would you, like, given another chance, say, well, gosh, circumstances now, as I know, maybe it wasn't a wise thing. Can you explain to the committee why you chose to fund this dangerous research in China?
Why did he decide? You think Fauci was acting on his own? You think that Fauci was independent in any way, shape, or form back then? That was all Donald Trump making all of those decisions, making Fauci say those things in public and to the American right and left, and all the things to do with Wuhan and the virus started in a meat market, a wet market, or started in a lab, or blah 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 blah. You think that he was saying all that stuff on his own, and Donald Trump didn't have nothing to do with it? But yet and still, Donald Trump is the man. Donald Trump make everybody do whatever he want to do. They bend to his will. But Fauci didn't. Fauci was the only one that didn't. All of this heat that Fauci got, y'all didn't think none of that heat went to Donald Trump? All of that heat needed to go to Donald Trump. All of it. Now, whether you agree with Rand Paul or not, those are the questions millions of Americans have been asking for years. Why Wuhan? Why fund that research? Knowing what we do know today, would you make the same decisions again? Instead of answering that, Fauci invokes the fifth, damn near through the whole session. And that's exactly why this hearing made headlines across the country and the world. But here's where I think both sides start talking past each other, okay? One side wants to make Fauci the villain behind every bad decision that happened during COVID, and the other side wants to pretend he did nothing wrong. I don't believe either one of those stories. Now, does that mean Fauci walks away clean? Absolutely not. I'm not here to turn him into a saint. He is not a martyr, and he is not above criticism. In fact, some of the criticism against him is fair. Now, does that mean Fauci don't have no responsibility? No. He's not a saint. Some of the criticism does belong to him. Fauci muffled the communication from day one. Early on, when people were asking about masks, he gave that slick, paternalistic answer that made it sound like masks weren't useful for the public. Later, we found out he was worried about supply shortages for healthcare workers. I understand the logistical conclusion, but the way he handled it incinerated the public trust. When you tell people one thing and then pivot hard the other way, without a clear, humble explanation, you create a credibility problem that never closed. It never closed. And that hole got filled with every conspiracy theory the internet could invent. He also developed this habit of speaking with the absolute certainty of the science. The data was incomplete, evolving in real time. All of that was evolving in real time, but he spoke with such certainty. That tone left no room for legitimate questions. Questions about kids falling behind in school, questions about small businesses, questions about delay in cancer screening, questions about mental health, questions about elderly Americans. Those things matter too. And too often, public health messages treated them like secondary concerns. Those are real criticisms that people have about Anthony Fauci. People keep acting like Anthony Fauci had the power to order all of this. He didn't. He advised. Other people decided these things, decided when stuff was going to be told, decided when stuff was going to be shut down, decided when all of these decisions were made that people didn't like, that the American people liked. Now, there's one piece of evidence that critics point to, and I think it's worth hearing about, though, right? Hold on. Where's that video? Okay.
In the red folder on your table is a copy of Section 192 of Title II of the U.S. Code. Your counsel's been provided a copy as well. That section makes it a crime for a witness appearing under subpoena to refuse to answer any questions pertinent to the question under inquiry. Do you have that in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Let the record record that the witness has refused to answer whether there's a folder in front of him based on his Fifth Amendment right.
Think about that for a second. Whether you like Fauci or you not, or you don't, or right or wrong, their hearing wasn't producing the answers that they wanted. Every question, the same response, the Fifth Amendment. And for millions of Americans watching, only deepened the distrust that people have for Fauci. But even if you believed every criticism leveled against Anthony Fauci, even if you think he handled that badly, even if you think he was arrogant, even if you think he should have been more transparent, there's still one question nobody on the right seems willing to answer. Who had the constitutional authority? Not Anthony Fauci. Donald Trump did. And here's the part that still makes my blood boil, right? Trump wanted the image of strong leadership without accepting any of the responsibility. The most unaccountable administration in our history. This is the most unaccountable administration in our history, right here. They wanted the responsibility. They wanted the image of strong leadership, but they didn't want to do no responsibility. They didn't want to take no responsibility for nothing. When the crisis first hit, Trump stood at the White House briefing room podium day after day after day. We saw him. He elevated. He put Anthony Fauci and that Deborah Birx front and center. He elevated them. He deferred to them. He let them set the tone for the national conversation. Yes, he did. He used their expertise as political cover for the decision that he wanted to make, the fucked up decision that he wanted to make. Remember what he kept saying? I'm listening to the doctors. We're following the science. At the time, that was politically useful. It made him look serious. It made him look presidential. It gave the country confidence, and the experts were helping guide the response. Then something changed. The economy tanked. People got restless. Businesses were closing. Schools stayed shut. His political base, the goofy MAGA, goofy right, goofy conservatives, started screaming about tyranny, government overreach, medical dictatorship. And what did Donald Trump do? Did he step up and say, these were my decisions to be made? I signed the executive orders, the emergency declarations. I accepted these recommendations. The buck stops with me. Did Donald Trump say any of that? No. He just let Fauci take the fall for all of the decisions that he, as the president, made. Every one of them. Because everybody right now want to vilify Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci didn't make a move unless Donald Trump told him to. So the person that you should be mad at is Donald Trump. But y'all ain't got no smoke for Donald Trump when this was absolutely his fault. Fauci did what he had done throughout his whole career. He looked for somebody else to Donald Trump did what he did for his whole career. He looked for somebody else to carry the blame. He started distancing himself. He didn't want to support Fauci. He was throwing little digs out there. He stood back, watched Fauci get attacked, and allowed the entire conservative media to turn his own chief medical advisor into public enemy number one. That's what Donald Trump allowed. He allowed that goofy MAGA, the goofy right, the goofy conservatives to turn on Dr. Fauci. He let them cook Dr. Fauci and let them turn a career public health official into a cartoon villain. And never once did Donald Trump say, enough is enough. He works for me. These were my policies. The buck stops with me. He never said that, Donald Trump. That is not leadership. That's political cowardice. And Donald Trump is a cowardice and a scammer. And that's the difference between people. That's the difference between him and that's the difference between him and Obama. Obama always said, the buck stop with me. If I ordered it, if it happened and I said it, then it's gonna stop with me. My representative did it, it stops with me. Not once, not now once have we heard Donald Trump say that. If my people did it, then the buck stops with me. It's my fault, my responsibility. Never. And that's the difference. That's the difference between the integrity between these two presidents. Fauci could recommend. Fauci could persuade. Fauci could even influence. But he could not sign executive orders like Donald Trump did. And that's where y'all attacking Fauci for stuff that Donald Trump allowed. Fauci couldn't declare emergencies. He could not overrule the president of the United States. Only one man could do all of that, and that was Donald Trump. That's wild. Turned him into a villain. I was like, no way. No way. Notice what happened. This whole hearing, the whole hearing stopped being about COVID. It stopped being about Wuhan. It stopped being about Fauci. It became chaos. That whole hearing. People yelling, lawyers arguing, threats to remove people from the room. And honestly, that's a pretty good metaphor for how America has handled this whole entire conversation. We spent years screaming at each other instead of asking one question that actually matters. Who is responsible for making federal policy? Because that's why I think the entire conversation is going off the rail. Anthony Fauci deserves scrutiny. I've already said that. His communication damaged trust. I said that. His certainty sometimes exceeded what the evidence could support. His public messaging left millions of Americans feeling misled. Those criticisms are legitimate, but criticism is not the same thing as constitutional authority. Donald Trump wanted the benefits of listening to the experts without paying the political cost if those experts' recommendations became unpopular. Think about that. Think about that. If the country had praised the COVID response, Trump would have taken credit for that shit. That goofy motherfucker in the White House would have took credit for the COVID response if it would have been good. If Operation Warp Speed was successful, Trump would have took credit for that. But when lockdowns became unpopular, when schools stayed closed, when Americans got angry, the blame shifted to Fauci. That's not accountability. That's political survival. And that's why I keep coming back to the same sentence. Fauci was the face. Trump was the one who held the pen. Trump was the one who was making the decisions. Now you have to fast forward to the end of this hearing, right? Listen to what Senator Ron Johnson had to say with his disingenuous ass. Ron Johnson. Hold on. Let me get that video. Here we go.
Dr. Fauci, I hope the American people listen very carefully to Chairman Paul's opening statement. I mean, it's a stunning indictment of the actions you've taken that have been so destructive to global health. I certainly understand why you needed a pardon. I certainly understand why, on the advice of counsel, you're not answering any questions, because I think it would be almost impossible for you to answer questions truthfully without really demonstrating what you did.
Hopefully y'all heard that.
Your culpability. Self-incriminating.
Okay. That's about as serious an accusation as you're ever going to hear from a United States Senator. Maybe you agree with every word Senator Johnson said. Maybe you don't. Maybe you think Anthony Fauci deserves every ounce of criticism he's receiving. But here's where I want to slow it down a little bit. Because my question tonight has never been whether Anthony Fauci deserves criticism. He does. I've already told you he does. His messaging failed. His communication failed. His arrogance demanded public trust. Those are real failures. My question is much simpler. Why did Donald Trump make Fauci the face of the federal COVID response? Anthony Fauci didn't walk into the Oval Office and appoint himself. Donald Trump put him on that stage. Donald Trump stood beside him. Donald Trump introduced him to the American people, defended him when the pandemic began. Trump chose to keep him there every single day, months. If Donald Trump truly believed Anthony Fauci was leading this country into disaster, why didn't he remove him? That's the question nobody seems willing to answer. That's the question that the right, goofy MAGAs, goofy MAGA, because y'all goofy as hell, conservatives, why is that not a question that y'all seem to be asking yourself? Why didn't Trump remove him if all of his advice was wrong and it was failed and was hurting the people and blah, 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 blah? That's the question y'all don't want to answer, because the Constitution gave Donald Trump that authority, not Anthony Fauci, Donald Trump. And that's why I keep saying Fauci was the face. Trump held that pen. Trump was in charge of that fucking pen. Listen to this.
The chairman has denied your assertion of privilege and directed you to answer, but you nonetheless refuse and stand on privilege despite the existence of the pardon. The committee will have to consider after this hearing what appropriate action should be taken against you for the failure to testify after being directed to do so. It's against the law to obstruct an investigation of Congress. There will be repercussions to your refusal to testify today. Senator Peters.
Maybe there will be repercussions. Maybe there won't be. Congress will decide on that, I guess. History will decide Anthony Fauci's legacy. But history also has to decide Donald Trump's legacy. Because here's the part that keeps getting erased. Anthony Fauci never signed an executive order. Never declared a national emergency. Never approved trillions of dollars in federal spending. Never controlled the White House coronavirus task force. Never had the constitutional authority to make federal policy. Donald Trump did. And that's why when things closed down, things wouldn't open, couldn't go out of the house, couldn't go eat, couldn't take certain things, couldn't go buy certain things. That was all Donald Trump and his thought and his decisions. Okay? Donald Trump did all of that. That's why this entire conversation matters. Some people want to tell a story like America was run by one unelected scientist. Like Fauci was in charge of the whole coronavirus experience. That's not how government works. Advisors advise, cabinet officials advise, scientists advise. The president decides. The president decides. So if you believe the federal COVID response damaged this country, if you believe the lockdowns went too far, if you believe messaging destroyed public trust, Americans deserve better, then your story can't stop with the Anthony Fauci. It has to include President Donald Trump, who elevated him to that national stage. It has to include the president who empowered him. The president who stood beside him every afternoon. The president who accepted his advice at that podium every day. And the president who, when the political winds changed or shifted, stepped back and let his own advisor get eaten alive, cooked, vilified. To this day, I could tell they still think Fauci lied to them. Just goofy madness hearing that Rand Paul put together. Just goofy. He's so worried about something that happened 5 years ago, he ain't worried about the Epstein files. He ain't worried about bringing them Epstein people to justice. He's so damn worried about Fauci, he ain't worried about bringing the war to the end over in Iran. He ain't worried about no war ending over in Iran. He's so worried about fucking Fauci. That's how goofy these right conservative people are. You worrying about cultural things instead of worrying about our country going down the tubes because we in a war, because we got pedophiles at the head of our government. You worried about cultural shit. Shit that happened 5-6 years ago. Shit that don't even happen. Once in a lifetime fucking virus. Pandemic. Once in a lifetime pandemic. Virus. In our lifetime, probably. And y'all worried about that, and y'all not worried about ending the war in Iran or catching these pedophiles that are hurting our children. Ain't worried about none of that. Just worried about Anthony Fauci, bringing him in, wasting taxpayer dollars, arguing with a advisor, a dude that sits at the desk and make decisions about how soon he gonna sharpen his fucking pencil for the day. That's wild to me that you people on the Republican right never take seriously the issues and the things that we hold valuable in this country. You worried about cultural shit. You worried about vilifying a fucking advisor instead of taking your president to task for the decision he made during COVID. So as soon as the winds change, the president stepped back and let him get fried. You don't get to blame the advisor for the commander's decisions. You don't get to elevate a man as the face of your response and then abandon him the moment the crowd turns, but then you ain't part of Trump's team. Because if you're a part of Trump's team, you already know you're going to be the fall guy. Look at fucking that goofy that went to jail for Donald Trump. His lawyer. I forgot his name. Michael Cohen or some shit. That goofy bastard. go to prison for this president. You already know you're taking the fall. Okay. You ain't supposed to get the claim. You ain't supposed to be a part of Operation Warp Speed, while pretending the scientists who helped carry it out were somehow acting on their own. That's not how that works. Anthony Fauci gave recommendations. Donald Trump held the pen, and that's the real story. That's not the cartoon version that the right want to give to y'all. They will always want you to be outraged about bullshit. Why am I outraged about fucking COVID? COVID is over. It was a once in a lifetime thing. We were evolving as it was developing. Fauci didn't know with certainty what was happening when and how, but he didn't have the authority to make decisions. Donald Trump did. Why y'all ain't got smoke for Donald Trump? Okay, this is the convenient version. The story about a man who had constitutional authority, which was freaking Donald Trump, and he refused to carry the political weight that came with it. That's Donald Trump. Okay, that's Donald Trump. He let Fauci be the face to it, and so since Fauci is the face, y'all goofies on the right keep attacking him about the damn response. We have vaccines that kids have to take every time they go to school. There's vaccines that they got to take when they go to school. Y'all lose y'all fucking mind when somebody tell you to take the vaccine of the COVID. Okay? You lose your fucking mind, but you let the kids go and take it in school, the vaccines in school. Just goofy logic all the way around. All the way around. And Donald Trump is the one who was responsible for any kind of decisions, any kind of things, any kind of whatever you want to blame Fauci for. Donald Trump is the person that you should be blaming, because Donald Trump was in charge. Okay, and Fauci invoked his Fifth Amendment right all throughout, and I'm glad he did, because he's not the. I would have added to that. I am not the commander in chief. I do not make decisions. I am just a vessel. I am just an advisor. I claim my Fifth Amendment right. I invoked my Fifth Amendment right to keep my mouth shut. And that's exactly what he did. Even though he has immunity, even though he's been pardoned for anything he might do in the future, he's already been pardoned. And I did the same thing. Because you goofies over there on the right fly all the way down the highway with your pants on fire for cultural shit, but you don't know how to govern a electorate as diverse as we are. You ain't got no smoke for the president when it come to the war, no smoke for the president when it come to Epstein file, no smoke for the president for closing things down and scamming the American people out of money. Ain't got no smoke for that, but we got to have a whole big old hearing on Fauci. And Fauci was just a pencil pusher. So, please hit the like and subscribe button if you like the content. Please and thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Alright, okay. I can whip together a powwow within an hour. I don't know what that means. Donald Trump doesn't control Fauci like a puppet. You think he knows everything that everybody does under him. That means nothing. Donald Trump got his ass in front of the camera every day during the pandemic. So since he had his ass in front of the camera every day, he should have had his ass in a meeting with Dr. Fauci every day. He had his ass in a meeting with Dr. Fauci every day. Donald Trump just wanted to be out there on camera, as per usual, spouting talking points and garbage and nonsense. Yes, Donald Trump does control the people under him. That's what he does. That's how he controls the people that he controls. Goofy. You didn't vote. I want to see your voting record. You fucking piece of shit. You voted for Trump and you're a fuck. I don't even know what that's about. Please, I have content like this every day. I just wanted to say my piece about Fauci. Not saying Fauci didn't make mistakes. He did. He made certain mistakes, but he wasn't the person that was in charge of making the decision whether those mistakes were going to be communicated to the American public. And you should have put the fire and the heat on President Trump. Like, he deserves all the fire and the heat to this day. He deserves all the fire and the heat right now. So, I appreciate you guys showing up. Please hit the like and share or subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Probably tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning. You think he reads the diary every minute below him? He's lying, plain and simple. As I said, Dr. Fauci was under Donald Trump's rule. You take the fall. You take the heat for your employee. You got the advice from your employee. You take the heat. You don't let people burn your advisor up. Ain't no way in hell I'd ever work for a person like Donald Trump, unless you were unethically challenged. If you're challenged like that, you would more than happy be able to join a Trump administration. If you have ethics and morality, you wouldn't want to be nowhere near somebody like Donald Trump. But it is what it is. And I'll see you guys in the next video. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. I appreciate you guys stopping by.